They hit me with a fine that could climb to 7 figures over a wheelchair ramp I built to get into my own house. And the only thing that ended up truly official was a court order evicting the HOA from the building they thought they owned. That's the headline. The part that makes people laugh and say, "No way, but yeah, that happened," if you've ever been told by someone with a clipboard that you don't belong on your own porch. You know what I mean. My name is Mason Blake, Riverbend, Colorado. Little cedar place my granddad built with stubborn hands, and a level that probably never lied. Before the accident, I ran the ridge trails at sunrise. Now the legs don't listen, so I do what engineers do, design around the problem. Chair hand control van, an aluminum ramp that hums when you roll it just right. Moose the lab, supervising with that big, dumb grin. Life was quiet in the good way. Coffee on the porch radio in the garage, until Linda Pratt won HOA president and decided rules could fix people. First envelope showed up tucked under my wiper sunout. Day, honest. And then I read it. Unapproved architectural modification. Remove the ramp in 10 days. Fines escalating to the moon. I took photos the way engineers pray. Tape measure in frame slope. Better than code motion lights tucked under the rail. The city permit printed and paper clipped. And I made a folder on my desktop named HOA, like I was whispering at a bear. 2 days later, a second letter. They'd snapped my van in the driveway, artfully cropped out my disabled plates, called it a commercial vehicle, and banned in view. And when I called the office, the volunteer sighed and said, "Rules are rules." Mr. Blake and I said, "So is state law." And then we both let the line go quiet. Monday brought the third. They called my permitted low-voltage alarm wire an unauthorized fence, $500 more, and I finally understood this wasn't confusion. It was a message to the man in the chair. I called Eddie next door, retired broadcast engineer. Garage looks like NASA scanner, always on. And he told me Pratt's patrol schedule, like a train table. 8 a.m., 1 p.m., 6 p.m., gold cart and a clipboard. You could set your watch to it. I mounted a tiny camera under my armrest and waited. 1 o'clock, I parked at the end of my drive, pretended to fiddle with a caster. Moose flopped in the shade, and here she came humming around the corner like a hymn nobody likes. She pulled sideways across the sidewalk, nose to my curb cut. So if I deployed my ramp, it would kiss plastic, and she put on that smile people wear when power feels good. "Mr. Blake, we need to discuss your fines." I kept it steady. My ramp is permitted and required for access. My van is legally parked. My system complies with code. She blinked. Smile tightened. Tried the line she loves. The rules apply to everyone. "You are not special." I nodded toward the public sidewalk she was blocking and asked her to move. She said, "This is common area, and I'm conducting official business." I said, "Is that your final answer?" She said, "And it is." And my little camera got every syllable. It wasn't fireworks, it was evidence, and evidence is the bridge. Good people walk across when a system pretends not to see. A week later, the house exploded into light at 2 a.m. Siren howling because I designed it that way. Moose pressed against my knees like, is this a game or a war? And I killed my lamp and watched the yard breathe. White, dark, white, dark. And right then, the cruiser rolled up blue and red, slow like a heartbeat. Officer Patel followed my beam to the flower bed, where the wire peeked up clean cut, with a tool not frayed, not chewed. And he took photos and notes and wrote it up as vandalism. And I told him about the fines, the sidewalk block, all of it. and he listened like it mattered. Eddie. Because of course had launched his drone, the second dispatch lit his scanner, and he captured a single heat signature, hustling away down Pine Hollow toward Pratt's end of the street. Could I prove it was her? No. Did it fit the pattern? You bet. I dropped the video into the folder and felt something settle, like I'd found the neck stud in a wall. The twist came out of a dusty attic box. Not a speech. My granddad saved every paper, and at the bottom of a yellow folder marked Community, I found a land lease from 1984. Turns out the cute utility building at our subdivision entrance, the one they painted hunter green and called Riverbend Community Center, sits on a skinny strip my granddad bought at a county auction for $1 and then leased to the HOA for $1 a year because he believed neighbors need a room to meet. The lease renewed every decade if the tenant kept the peace and followed state and federal law while acting in their role. Keep the peace. Follow the law. I read it twice, then again, slow enough to feel the floor tilt under my wheels. I wasn't just a resident. I was the landlord, whose tenant forgot who owned the keys. I called Elena Browning, former Army JAG turned ADA and housing law surgeon. Not a bulldog, and I laid everything on her conference table. The letters, photos, Patel's report, the chair cam clip, the lease with its quiet little hammer baked in. She nodded once and drew the plan in 2 lines. File with the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division for a pattern of disability discrimination and retaliation, then serve a notice to cure or quit on the HOA as my tenant. 30 days to drop every fine, issue a written apology, and remove Pratt from the board, or vacate my building. A process server walked it into their monthly meeting and said, "You've been served." Pratt and Eddie told me the room froze like someone pulled the plug on the PA. They did nothing, of course, they did nothing. And on day 31, Elena filed an unlawful detainer, eviction in regular English, and the judge watched the chair cam clip, asked Pratt if that was her signature on the lease renewal, heard yes, and signed a writ of possession with a stamp that sounded heavier than it looked. 48 hours to vacate, sheriff to enforce. We enforced it under the clean noon sun at the Riverbend Summer Bash. Because accountability isn't mean. It's medicine. Street smelled like kettle corn. Kids were doing scooter laps. Cover band playing Tom Petty like they missed him. And Pratt stood on the green steps with her clipboard like a crown. Elena walked at my left. 2 deputies behind, with faces that say, "We don't start trouble." We end it locksmith by the curb, like a quiet period at the end of a long sentence. The lead deputy read the writ, and people hushed the way strangers hush in a church. Pratt jabbed a finger at me and said, "You are trespassing on HOA property," and the deputy didn't even look my way. "Ma'am, we are returning this building to its legal owner. Please clear the property." 30 minutes later, the hall was empty. The writ taped to the door keys warm in my palm. Tom Petty fading into the sound of people realizing the world had moved an inch toward fair. If it ended there, you'd feel good, and I'd be naive. Pratt's humiliation curdled. She tailed me in her golf cart, parked across from my place, like a gargoyle. Pushed a petition calling me a nuisance, and the notary seal turned out fake. Half the signatures didn't match county records. A few neighbors swore she tricked them into signing by saying it was for a streetlight. Elena stacked affidavits. The clerk wrote a letter Eddie's cameras collected hours of her idling and staring, and we had a pile we could take to the DA and likely win. Elena asked the bigger question, do you want to fix a person or fix a system? I sat with it. Then we used gravity. Buried in the bylaws was a dissolution clause, Simple majority of homeowners present could recall the board and dissolve the HOA outright. We booked the library auditorium, mailed certified notices, and spent a week on porches with facts instead of speeches. You know what I mean. The meeting felt like thunder before rain. Someone nominated me to chair. I didn't plan that. I just rolled up and lined up the pieces. Forged petition on the screen clerk's letter. On the screen, 3 affidavits, up with names redacted. The sidewalk clip one more time. Then I asked a quiet question. If this were your mother or your kid, could they reach the sidewalk today? Stories poured out. A fine for a wreath left up after Christmas. A bike photographed and posted like a mugshot. A warning for tall grass, while a man was in the hospital. None of it a scandal on its own. Together, a map of power used like a hobby. Pratt tried to take the floor. The room looked past her, and I read the clause word for word. We voted. Hands rose like wheat. The motion carried with room to spare. No more patrols, no more letters. Under Wipers, Riverbend's law. Would-be Riverbend's law again. City code, state code, and basic decency, not bylaws, pretending to be a constitution. After that, the air felt different. Someone pulled the brown HOA signs by the entrance. Kids chalked flowers on the posts. We put the leftover HOA funds into a library trust and fixed the worst sidewalks and added ADA curb cuts. You can roll a cooler across the green building became what my granddad meant it to be, a place to share. To a library in the back, potlucks on Tuesdays, arguments about barbecue that end in leftovers, and my ramp might be the least interesting thing on the block now. People ask if I'm satisfied, and I tell them I didn't go to war with a person. I took apart a bad system and used the empty space to build something better. Still, here's the part I want you to wrestle with. Was serving that writ at the festival too much? Or is public accountability the only language petty power understands? Where do you draw the line between protecting a neighborhood's look and protecting a neighbor's access? Have you been that person on the porch with a letter that says you don't belong? Or have you ever watched rules save a place you love? Tell me below. Agree. Argue. Tell on yourself a little, if you have to. I read every one. If this hit something true, hit subscribe. Send it to the friend who needs the nudge, and keep your camera rolling and your paperwork clean. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it knocks with a manila envelope and a quiet grin.